we were privileged enough to be approached by LexisNexis to write the book. I think it was, at the time, it was very serendipitously, it was very topical, with the whole expat tax coming into change. I think it is also apt for us to write the book because we went to Parliament to fight the expat tax so that it wouldn't be repealed in its entirety. And I think it was good for our firm. It certainly made us smarter. It was a big challenge, but all in all, especially in tax, if you don't learn new things, if you don't grow, then you'll stagnate.
All right, so let's talk about the book. I mean, you mentioned in the beginning that it's the first of its kind. I mean, there's a lot of textbooks that I'm sure viewers would be able to find. Take me through the process of putting it together, finding the information, working with your team. What was that like?
So I think if you, Judge Dennis Davis, who wrote the foreword, I think he mentioned in that tax literature has moved from a place where you have more general publications and academic guides to more specific economic areas of activity, and that's specifically what we did with this book. Tax is so wide, it's difficult to write one book to cover the whole area. So for expatriate tax, as you can see, is also quite a very broad spectrum. So just properly dealing with one area of tax such as this requires a dedicated publication in our view.
Yeah. So the book, when one reads it, it comes across as very technical. It's a lot of, I suppose if you had first-hand experience with either having studied tax or work with tax, it might be a little bit easier to navigate. But the one thing you guys managed to do was put in examples, so as the reader goes through the different forms of legislation or certain terms, you have an example that follows, that's able to paint, I suppose, a bigger picture. How important was that in compiling the book to make sure that, I suppose, a wide variety of readers can at least navigate through most of the chapters?
Yeah, so we were very mindful of that from the beginning, because since tax is embedded in legislation, it is very technical in nature. But to ensure that it's more user-friendly, we balance the technical side with specific examples. We explain how it would work in practice. We also explain what the history to the legislation was, why it was enacted, how it should be interpreted, so that the layperson and the technocrat would understand that section fully.
How would you describe South Africa's tax system? I mean, from the onset, you say, understanding the concept of burden of proof is one of the few chapters, one of the few things you can probably start as a base and then move on and start building. How would you describe the tax system?
Well, I think that's an excellent question, and starting with the burden of proof was also very intentional, because I don't think the layperson or normal taxpayers realize that in the context of tax, whilst it doesn't work like that in terms of the rest of our law, you are basically guilty until proven innocent. So you need to show to SARS why you should not be taxed in a certain way. And as a taxpayer, you should always, in the back of your mind, think where if you had to stand in front of a judge and the scales are tipped equally, the judge would have to rule in favor of SARS. You would need to ensure that you have sufficient evidence, sufficient narrative explanation to show that whatever you say to SARS makes sense, and that you can prove that beyond, on a balance of probabilities.
Okay, from your experience, I mean, the one thing I've picked up when it comes to a conversation about money, people get very nervous. Nobody loves to talk about money, whether it be theirs or other people's money. But tax is also another term that people get, I suppose, cold feet, they become frightened. There's something about the word tax or dealing with aspects of tax that just get people all flustered. From your perspective, do you read the same or get the same indications when you even talk to somebody about their tax affairs?
I think certainly. I think first of all, tax is inherently complex. It's an all but infinite spectrum. To understand it is a lifelong challenge, I think. So that's one side of things, but also I think taxpayers are inherently cautious of the Revenue Authority. When when SARS start using words like criminal prosecution or criminal offense, people become very modest and humble and scared for good reason. SARS has a wide arsenal of powers that they can wield. They can have, if SARS goes up against you, it can ruin you financially. If you were really reckless in your dealings, you might be guilty of a criminal offense. And I think that's the other side of things as well.
Since the debate around expat tax has, intensified, from your experience, I mean, what are some of the prevalent questions that come through, or mistakes you've seen people make when it comes to their tax affairs dealing with expat tax, be it because somebody may have rushed or panicked when they heard that this legislation, was in the coming? What have you seen?
Well, I think what we've seen specifically, and what everyone has seen, is that all of a sudden everyone is an expert on expat tax. Quick tax advice on social media is readily available, and sometimes people push certain schemes or products and people just go for it, which may in the long run cost them quite dearly. But what we've seen with the book is literally, if you want to be an expert in something, you have to write a book about it, frankly. I mean, initially we contemplated or anticipated that the book would be maybe 400 pages. But in the end, just because the subject matter demanded it, we went over 800 pages. Things that we thought we were quite proficient and had quite a good understanding of proved to be quite complex and humbling in the end. So I think, people need to be cautious in what they, especially if they've left the country, how they should deal with formalizing that process. If they need to consider, if they've done it correctly, the historical exposure that they might have going forward, how should they be filing their returns. And what we've also seen is that people from even before the law changed, they were completely non-compliant as well.
Nompumelelo Siziba will